All right, welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is August 24th, a Tuesday evening. I'm sorry, Wednesday evening to you guys, 2022. Let's check out our solar wind speeds coming in at 387.4 kilometers per second with a density of 3.43. We have a few sunspot regions to speak of. Very unique situation we're looking at here. I want to point out the 3086 and 3087. Two very active and interesting features on our sun, and I'll show you here in a bit on the SDO. But look at the prominence that we're seeing. This is the southern part of our star, the southeastern limb. So this is behind the big sunspot that we are seeing, or not big, I should say, but there is a sunspot region that is located in or right at the edge of a coronal hole. And I'll show you that here just in a quick second. Let's zoom back out. Sunspot number 52, TCI has went up a little from 12.5 up to 13.35 over the last 3 weeks. And looking like cosmic radiation above 0%, we were slightly below 0% just for a very brief time. But cosmic radiation continuing to be present even during this so-called period of the beginning of the maximum. KP indices are at a 0 and our 24-hour max is at a 1. Now, the significance of that, let's get into that. So, pardon me. This is an Earth-facing coronal hole where the arrow is. Very small. Very, very small. However, when the KP indice is at between 0 and 2, and we have an Earth-facing coronal hole, we do see increased chances for a strong to moderate, or moderate to strong earthquake, I should say. Somewhere in the range of, 6.1 and 6.7. Nothing major, but enough to cause a little shaking. And that usually is based on a decent sized coronal hole. This one here, even though it does swallow the Earth, it's big enough to swallow the Earth if you put the planet Earth scale to, right, Earth facing. However, we've had bigger coronal holes Earth facing, and we have seen strong earthquakes around the 6.7 range. So with the coronal hole this small, I'd be shocked to see anything over a 6 point in the next 24 to 36 hours. Again, nothing really over a 6.0 in the next 24 to 36 hours, but it could happen. It could be just a sharp jolt. But here's another feature I want to show you guys. So the prominence that I was just showing you that looked like a forest on the sun, that's here, okay? And the sunspot region here is pretty weak. But the prominence, and you can see it here on the edge of the corona, on the back side of the sun, we have an active region here and here as well. And I'll see if I can find a SDO motion. But this sunspot region here, where my arrow is pointing at, this one intrigues me. And the reason why this one intrigues me is that when I first started my research on this topic in the very early days of this, I remember Lee Wheelbarger talking to me about the concerns of some of the weird phenomena that we would see during a grand solar minimum. And one of his concerns was that an umbra would snap off in or next to the edge of a coronal hole. Now, folks, the size of this coronal hole, and I'll move my arrow out of the way, this is pretty significant when it comes to, let me kind of zoom in a little bit and I'll scoot up. This is significant size. So the solar wind speeds out of a coronal hole this big, you're probably looking right around 1 million to 1.3 million miles per hour. Just approximately. I'm giving you a ballpark here. Okay. I think that translates somewhere around this mid 600 to 700 kilometers per second. So it's a strong solar wind. But Lee's biggest concern or a worry that he had was that an umbra or a magnet filament release happens inside of a coronal hole or just on the edge. And folks, this to me, this looks like it's inside the coronal hole. I mean, this is weak corona right here, very weak here. Obviously, you can see the hole clearly, but also here as well. I have to say that this is the closest thing I've ever seen to what Lee was talking about. And again, the concern is when this umbra or magnet or plasma breaks off, it then gets basically, it hitchhikes a ride across the solar system via the 1,000,000-mile-an-hour solar wind. Imagine someone throwing a lightning rod, a spear of some sorts from the sun at 1.13 million miles per hour. Now, that's not going to happen. This is in a southern part of the region of the sun. Again, I'll put my arrow where Earth is. So there you can see that this is going to be well south of anything and really is not going to affect Earth if something like that did happen. But it's still interesting to see this, and when we know that our star is going to be going through a lower period of solar activity, and these are the kinds of things that we have to watch out for. Now, I'm not an expert on this. Lee has put a lot of time into plasmic physics, and just from some of the things that I read, something like that where a filament or umbra or a plasma release along inside a solar wind as well, that would probably do some significant damage to the grid. Now, I'm not saying tonight that go throw all your things in a Faraday cage if that's what you prefer to do. By all means, I don't blame you. I rate this as a 1 to 2% chance. That's what I'm saying. 1 to 2% chance that some kind of power disruption could happen if this particular active region erupts with something inside this coronal hole, spewing this really fast coronal hole. Again, the wider this coronal hole is, folks, the faster the solar wind speeds. And I could be lowballing the speeds. It could be as much as 1.5 million miles per hour, because if you look at the edge to edge of this, I mean, these are what cause significant seismic activity, where it's either a volcano eruption or earthquake. Now, people have told me, Jake, you shouldn't correlate coronal holes and KP indices and say that, the seismic activity happens from these. It's not proven yet. Well, I don't know about that. I don't mean to brag. I'm not saying this for bragging purposes, but last time I was on air, or it was earlier in August, where I called it an earthquake, almost exactly what it was. And it wasn't because I had a hunch. It was just based on the position of our sun, the KP indice at the time, and the size of the coronal hole. And with that, I took an educated guess of just being an observer for nearly a decade now on this topic. By any means am I an expert, but I think after doing it for that long, we start to pick up on certain things. And I feel like that watching this cycle fold out in front of us, and all the training and all the preparation that I've had for observing things like this, this lines up with everything that I have been taught about grand solar minimum, solar cycles, and the concerns that we could see. Now, folks, by any means have I said that this solar max is over. We've only begun this max. And so we're going to have some time of, higher solar activity. Sunspot numbers have been hovering between 100 and 130, which is on a good, strong streak. And then it weakens a little bit. We see it drop down to 39, somewhere between 39 and 60. It does that even during a minimum. There's days where we don't have spots, and there are days when we might have one tiny spot, and then it goes away 24 hours later. So the cycles are the same. Whether it's a minimum or a maximum, we see up and down activity, no matter if we're in a maximum or a minimum. Again, solar cycles, this is cycling through. So a couple things to watch. Solar activity picking up a little bit. Very concerning about this new phenomenon. Somebody asked me earlier if there's papers on this, and I'm not sure about that, because really, this is based on Lee's experience of his research, and everything that he reviews was peer reviewed. So I would lead to believe that there is some peer reviewed work on there. I'm sure I could dig and find you guys some papers. But interesting times we are definitely in right now when it comes to space weather. Let's go over to our website, thegrandsolarminimum.com. Take a look at the backside of the sun, and it does look like we're going to get active once again. But check out even the stereo B is also picking up the coronal hole around this sunspot. So this confirms it in my eyes that this sunspot is sitting directly in the middle, almost in the middle, of a large coronal hole. Very interesting. And now we're going to see if this theory comes to fruition. And we'll be watching this sunspot for the next 36 hours as it will become Earth facing eventually. We are just inside almost 35 on the longitude. Once it's at 0, obviously that would be Earth facing. Sorry about that. About being a klutz here. So, again, interesting situation that we have that we will continue to watch. And like I said, there's nothing to be, I'm not trying to stroke any fear or say that there's something serious coming from this, but this is the first that we have seen here on the Grand Solar Minimum. So I know we had a couple questions about that. I wanted to go over that a little bit. And I think let's take a look at the SDO. I was hoping you really see it better on the 193 angstrom, the 211 angstrom, a little bit in the combined angstrom of 304. And then, of course, that's pretty much it. But the 193, even the 335, it shows it just a little bit as well. So, again, to be fair, it's not showing up as defined in all angstroms, but all angstroms have a specific duty when it comes to what angle, what lighting we're catching these images from our satellites. All right, let's go over to my Twitter page real quick and just see what we can see. I will be talking about this here shortly, about Governor Abbott. Check out some news here that David Burt shared with us, and he's right. No one's talking about this. This is Greenland, snow mass gains, okay? The blue line, the royal blue line on the bottom image. I'll go ahead and enlarge this here and see what it looks like on this. Let's zoom it up a little bit. Nope, let's not do that. Let's make it normal size. Okay, so you guys can see on the blue line here, this is 2022. And this in the red is 2011, 2012. The end of a minimum and the beginning of the next maximum in solar cycle 24. Obviously, we can see a significant increase here of snow gain at this point, and we're supposed to be in a maximum, which to me lowers solar activity, okay, contributes to colder temps, more snow, right? Well, the fact that we're looking at La Nina for year number 3 in a row is contributing to this cold weather, but as well, we are not seeing a normal max. So when you're talking about a sun that is not putting out normal output, then it changes the dynamics of the climate in the entire solar system, not just here on Earth. Remember, the sun is the life force for all the planets in the solar system. Not so much for Pluto. It's a little cold and lonely out there. Same with Uranus and Neptune and all that. And even Saturn. It's kind of lonely out there, guys. But my point being is that this gigantic star is responsible for changing the climate on the planets in the solar system. Now, we're not saying that there isn't a small influence from man. Urban heating islands, I should say, heat islands. We got, pardon me. When you talk about the amount of asphalt that the human race has laid down since 1850, well, asphalt, of course, it's going to absorb more solar energy, and it will warm the surface faster. By any means, is that an omission of man-made global warming? Okay, that is just basic science and physics, that black asphalt will absorb more TSI than white. If you painted your streets white, it would actually reflect some of that TSI. It would not absorb as much heat. It's science. That's the real science. That's the real science. Okay, black absorbs, light is reflective and cooler. I'll give you an example. In the NFL, in the early part of the season, say teams like Carolina, Tampa Bay, Jacksonville, Houston, Arizona, those teams would wear their white jerseys at home during the months of September and maybe early October. And then they wear their darker jerseys in the winter. Now, check it out. Watch it in the football season if you're into that kind of thing. But so that's, and you ask, well, why do they do that? Well, it's because the darker holds in more heat. So in the wintertime, when you're playing in Cleveland, it's still cold, but at least the sun, if it does come out on a cold, crisp day by the lake, at least your uniform will absorb that TSI and convert it into heat. So there's a difference between man-made climate change and these simple little tiny phenomena that is just basic scientific knowledge. And that's why we follow the UAH with Roy Spencer and John Christie, is because, in my opinion, you're talking about temperature readings from 2 meters above the surface. Well, that's around 6.7 feet. A lot of people are around 6 feet tall, so we're not really... Are we really going to argue about feet here from the surface? Is there really that big of a cooling difference when you're 6 feet into the atmosphere? Anyway, so to me, this is top news for folks who follow this topic. Look at Greenland. This is an example that we are not melting on the North Pole. We are well above the median average, okay? And almost outperforming some of the more record years. And again, we are in a solar maximum, the very beginning of it. This should be an indicator of just how weak the sun actually is right now. If we are starting to see cold records and snow mass gain in August, in the late part of summer here in the Northern Hemisphere, this is incredible stuff, folks. Again, we were told by Al Gore and company that no more snow, no more ice. Hurricanes are going to be more frequent. Oh, remember that report about Tonga producing warming effect? Well, this red line here, folks, shows you the temperature in the stratosphere. And if you look here, we are definitely below average. So if anything, I don't know what NASA was talking about, but this volcano did nothing to warm anything. Look at this red line, well below the averages here. The stratosphere is not doing that well. So don't believe the hype, folks. Look at the facts yourself. Look at the information. Oh yeah, this is one of my favorite images on Twitter today. Or not today, a couple days ago. This was August 21st of 1893, and we had not 1, 2, 3, but 4 hurricanes simultaneously happening at the same time. Most of them are a Cat 1, actually 2 Cat 1s and 2 Cat 2s. Now, I'm being cheeky here, and I'm saying, well, it must be all that CO2 that man was letting go back in 1893. Yeah. Here is the ACE index, and what this is the it's kind of like an energy thing for hurricanes, strength and all that, and frequency. The red line represents 2022. I mean, folks, we are supposed to be somewhat upticking in hurricane activity, and according to Al Gore, Obama, Greta, Michael Mann, Bill Nye, George Clooney, and other clowns, they've been telling you that man-made climate change is going to bring more devastating storms, and more infrequent, more in strength because of man-made global warming. And it's not happening. And look, the only reason why it's not happening this year is because we are now entering year 3 of a La Nina. It's kind of hard for ocean temperatures to get where they need to be. Here we are at the end of August, where peak season is right. We're right at the doorstep of peak season. And we got 2 little tiny yellow blobs right now that's got a 20% chance of making it. No indication whatsoever of an active, but again, we can't predict the weather. I can tell you right now today that we are going to not have any hurricanes, and then 24 hours later, bam, we get 3 or 4 waves off of Africa. But my point I'm trying to show you guys is that this has not been an ongoing thing where we have seen increasing hurricanes and stronger storms. Oh, I love this one. Only a fool believes that electricity used for air conditioning harms the planet, but electricity used to charge a Tesla does not. Interesting stuff here. And then I had a little fun the other day with Gerald Kootenai. He made the comment that the word dickhead was trending on Twitter. And I said, you're right. Indeed it was. Just wanted to post a picture of the man and the myth here. Gerald Kootenai. Hashtag dickhead. Okay, let's continue to look here. More proof that the ice situation in the Arctic that, Al Gore and company like to brag about and talk about how, it's melting. But yet we keep seeing these numbers pulling further away from the worst melt that we ever had seen. And now we're starting to see, like the numbers here from 2012. Not every year in 2016, not every month was the worst month on record. So with that being said, during the peak of this solar max, actually was right around 2014, we didn't see a lot of melt. Confusing, right? I get it. There's a lot of weird things to go through here. Still a lot of unknowns in this research. But right now, as it speaks, we are well over the amount of ice that we were from our record low. And it seems like every time we keep showing this chart, it keeps getting further and further away from the top as we go. Just having a little fun with Kootenai, that's all. Look at this. Google searches for firewood in Germany. Wow. Off the charts. I tell you what, right now, folks, if you would like to donate to our PayPal account, we are definitely starting that fundraiser. We are going to definitely have to stock up on firewood. And I'm finding prices right now for right around $340 a cord, and that's for August. Usually it's a little bit cheaper in the summer, but not the case. I think these loggers are definitely anticipating a very busy winter this year up here in the Northeast. Want to talk about some flash floods here. These torrential rains are the encore from what happened in Texas. Guys, this has happened a lot this year. We've seen Missouri, Kentucky, and the Kentucky situation was bad because of the landscape out there. We had the landslides because of the mountains, the valleys, the hills, a lot more dangerous terrain in Kentucky versus, St. Louis, Missouri. But here, this video is showing us what I'm trying to talk about, and this is all the flooding. The 1 in 1,000 year floods, okay? Now, it's important to talk about this because just because we see multiple 1 in 1,000 year floods happen in a period of time does not mean it's climate change. In fact, if you look at these 3 storms here in the east, south, and the Midwest, those were affiliated with the same system. If you look at the system here in the south, well, this is part of the monsoon season, and unfortunately, as dry as it's been, A lot of rain really fast is bad news. And everyone knows that. And I don't care where you live, no drainage system is prepared to deal with 1 in 1,000 year floods. So you're asking me, Jake, if it's not global warming causing it or climate change, what's causing it? And I'll show you. Not that, well, it is the sun, but it's another element of the sun that we are forgetting to mention in our modeling, and that is, you guessed it, galactic cosmic rays. Folks, I want to put this chart in front of your face here for a minute because it's important to note that in the last minimum, and I'm just talking about a regular solar minimum here, okay, we see cosmic radiation rates in the 5% range. This is the beginning of the solar minimum. This is the bottom part of the solar minimum, and then we started to come out of the minimum, going into the maximum in the 15s and 16s before 2016 heading back into a minimum. By 2017, we were definitely seeing the effects of a solar minimum for cycle 24 heading into 25. Now, since 2017, we have seen dosage rates above 5%. Since 2017, only until early 2022 has it dropped. So you compare that to the last solar cycle, which we had increased solar or cosmic rays for 3 years. We're talking 5 years here in this solar cycle ending 24, going into 25. Now, what does that mean? And I'm sure you've heard this term before on Diamond's channel when he continues to say how fluxed we are with cosmic radiation. And what he's saying is that there are so much cosmic rays, highly charged particles, creating so much cloud nucleation. And during the solar minimum that we just had, which was pretty deep, and the facts are right here in front of us, folks. I'm not making this up. 5 years of large cosmic radiation dosage rates will really build up that juice, that highly charged particles. And again, I've always told you this, think of highly charged particles as steroids for rain droplets that come from water vapor. So it just injects nuclei with cloud and water particulates and expands the growth. And this is why we see these 1 in 1,000 years floods, because of how much cosmic radiation we are seeing. Now, take a step back, folks. Think about this for a minute. If we're not even in the teeth of the grand solar minimum, we're only at the beginning. We just ordered the appetizer, okay? We're finishing our salad, and we're starting to eat the mozzarella sticks right now, all right? That's where we are in the grand solar minimum when you look at it as a 4-course meal. So it's at the very beginning. Cosmic radiation dosage rates are going to be even higher during the next upcoming solar minimum that is slated, according to Dr. Zarkova's work and what we've observed here at the Grand Solar Minimum channel. We are slated to see our next minimum begin somewhere around late 2023 and early 24, February, Marchish, something like that. I could be off by a few months, give or take. Nonetheless, when you look at her projections, she was 97% accurate on solar cycle 24. That is pretty accurate, folks. When you're talking about 97% accurate, and all she's using, folks, mainly is mathematics and, of course, astrophysics. But where she gets these numbers, where she gets these temperature rises and decreases in years and charts this stuff out is all based on Solar Dynamo and her mathematics. And she is a PhD in mathematics and astrophysics. So I'm going to trust the PhD to give me the facts and the science about cosmic radiation, about magnetic fields of the sun and our planet, and what a weaker magnetic field does to all the planets here in the solar system, not just here on Earth. All right, so I want to move on to also here in Dallas too. This is an older story, obviously. Our good friend Lee Wheelbarger mainly gave me the heads up for this way before this all took place, and boy, was he spot on. He called the rain that was supposed to happen 10 to 11 inches in some areas in just 24 hours. Now, thankfully, we didn't have a lot of casualties here. About 100 homes were damaged, but that number is expected to climb as the damage reports are still being taken. This report was done on the 30th. East of Dallas, or 23rd, I'm sorry. East of Dallas reported 15 inches of rain. Okay. Again, Lee was being conservative with his 10-inch to 11-inch forecast. We got more. Why did we get more rain? We've had higher cosmic radiation dosage rates building up in the atmosphere. And new studies show that the Tonga volcano eruption put a ton of water vapor in the atmosphere. I believe these volcanic eruptions over the past several years during the minimum have built up a stockpile of water vapor in the atmosphere. So proof that we're showing a cooling stratosphere, proof that there's more moisture in the atmosphere, and on top of that, with seeing the cooler stratospheric temperatures, we are also starting to see ocean temperatures moderate or drop a little bit, and also starting to see a trend of global temperatures, surface temperatures starting to drop starting in the year 2016 and have been on a steady decline since. That just drives the AGW nuts. YouTube and Google, they hate it too, but tough. We report the truth, folks. Prove me wrong, because everything I'm telling you has been vetted, and you can look it up for yourself. Nebraska farmer loses an entire crop from hail damage. Hopefully Matt is watching. In fact, let me grab my cellular telephone device and see if he's here. Because when I saw this, I wanted to ask him a question about this. I don't see him. Matt's a busy guy. He is a farmer, after all, one of the most underpaid professions in the country. That with teaching. Because they don't teach anymore, right? Most of them have to indoctrinate. They have to follow the school curriculum. So can't blame the teachers. They're just doing their job, right? Just trying to make a living, pay the bills, I guess. No, Matt's not here, but I'm sure he'll get to watch this later. And my question is this really hail damage? A lot of this to me looks like a bunch of tillage that didn't get done, and just the same as all of the crop damage out here in Nebraska is due to lack of rain. Lots of dry conditions in southwestern parts of Nebraska. Not so much as bad in our friend Matt's area. It's still bad. They had to pull crops in that region, actually. Matt told me this the other day, that farmers in parts of Nebraska, because of the drought, because of how weak the crops are, they are now chopping down stalks and baling them for cattle feed. But it's not that simple, as there are a certain amount of chemicals, natural chemistry from developing crops that need to further mature before it could actually be turned into cattle feed. So there's another process to help make that happen faster. All this is adding up, folks. The manpower for this, the gas it costs to put in the tractors, even though they're not harvesting, but they're still pulling it from the field. And now they've got to process this grain another way to make sure it's safe for our cattle or any livestock at that. So things are getting a little desperate. Now, I know some of you will say, oh, the farmers get taken care of by the government. Well, that's not true either. And a lot of farmers are losing their farms because of the lack of help from the government and its old policies that really need to be revamped. The Platte River flows back near Columbus. Now, Matt sent me pictures. This is the picture actually Matt sent me too. This was about a week or so ago. The Platte River had dried up. I mean, absolutely incredible, folks. Now, what is interesting about this? We have had lack of moisture in the state of Nebraska this year. That's been no secret. So how many farmers out there were actually able to pump water to irrigate their crops at some water resource that could have led back to the Platte, on top of the fact that we are seeing very hot and dry conditions. But folks, remember, to get this kind of result, don't we have to see multiple years of bad drought before we see a complete devastation? Now, as of now, there is water starting to flow, and that's a good thing, right? They got a bunch of rain on Friday, or Saturday, I should say, and because of the torrential rain they got, look at the map here, the drought map. It is definitely improved in parts of eastern Nebraska, southern parts of Nebraska. Now you see that southwestern, very extreme area. But what I'm trying to say is that if this river was dry because of a drought, this entire state would be close to the red, all of it. And it's not. Today, Mr. Roy Spencer shared his thoughts on the concerns of the lake that dried up down in Texas, Lake Mead. And he brought up a very interesting fact, in that the increased population in these semi-desert areas has drained the resources of Lake Mead. And also, Lake Mead is somehow affiliated, I believe, with the Hoover Dam. So there has been work being performed on the Hoover Dam that has affected the flow at some point. So what I'm trying to get at is that the media is very misleading, and they want to chalk this up as this is man-made global warming, and that we are looking at, chaotic situation here. That it's because of CO2. So they want to show you all these pictures of dried up rivers and dried up lakes, but then people like Roy Spencer show you facts about population. And since we've had a dry summer, there's been more irrigation, there's been more pumping water from natural resources, farmers doing the best they can to try to water their crops in this devastating drought so far. And again, I want to mention this too, folks. Remember, the grand solar minimum doesn't mean ice age all over the globe. No, the grand solar minimum has brought down the global temperatures. But it doesn't mean the entire globe turns into an ice cube. In fact, if you read back on previous grand solar minimums, you will see some areas suffered major drought and major famine and crop loss because of that drought. It got worse during a period of time that we saw colder winters and even shorter growth seasons. It got worse. Short, hot summers. Told a friend of mine back in the day about what he was going to see weather-wise in Texas over the next 3 years. We had this conversation back in the winter, March or December of 2018. I told him short, hot summers, short growing seasons as well. Crops will be suffering droughts in some area across the middle plains. Drought could be increased higher and warmer in the Northwest Pacific. Longer, colder winters, freakishly cold temperatures reaching far south. This was in 2018, and he lives in Texas. Folks, 2019, 20, and 21, I've reported extreme cold, and we all know what happened in 2021 when we had that horrible freeze for 18 days that just turned everything into a winter wonderland. Now, that doesn't mean the rest of the globe was frozen, and we're not calling this an ice age. The grand solar minimum shows us extremes on both sides. So that's why we do this channel. We want to educate people and let them know that the sun and its cycles cause these weather phenomena, these incredible, just 1 in 1,000 year floods. They happen. It's not a coincidence, folks, that all of a sudden we're seeing all these 1 in 1,000 year floods. It's because it's cyclic. It's happened before. If it didn't happen before, it would be considered a major deal. But the fact they're saying it happened 1,000 years ago, well, what was going on 1,000 years ago? Oh, I remember. It was probably all those airplanes flying. No, that was 1,000 years ago. Well, it had to have been all the factories producing. No. Well, maybe it was all the electric car charging stations. No, that's not it either. Damn. I thought human CO2 emissions cause global warming. So again, folks, we've seen this before, but that doesn't make this okay. I'm not cherry coating this one bit. In fact, the next point I want to bring up is on why I'm talking about crops. Is I'm talking about why we're affected with fertilizer shortages as our world leaders around the world are trying to get rid of fossil fuels. That affects our agriculture and is affecting our food production. And the only thing that's man-made about our food production loss right now is this Ukraine situation. In the yellow is currently this year projection in production in these particular fields. Wheat, maize, barley. These are numbers that are usually frequently a lot higher. And you could see a 20 to 40, maybe even 50% drop in some of these projections. Now, over the past several years, we have seen these numbers also, drop as well. You can clearly see the decline. But, and I'm talking about the exports, and I'll show you which side is which. So this is the exporting side of business, and this is importing. Importing more, not so much this year, and not exporting as much either. So if we're not importing as much, that means we're keeping more of our exports. Obviously, we can see that. In previous years, we've had more exports coming out of Ukraine. Not so much now. So, folks, is Russia in Ukraine because they want to have control of the breadbasket of European nations? Yes. They're already playing control of the natural gas and the energy, the oil, the flow of that, how it's going to be paid for. They want to change that. So absolutely there is a factor to this Russian war and our energy and food crisis that's looming right around the corner. But I want to tell you that the Ukraine war, it probably carries about 17% of the troubles that we are having globally with supply of food and oil and energy. The other 83% is coming from 200 and some plus nations that signed on to the Paris Treaty climate. And they want to change their economy by banning fossil fuels, no more gasoline engines, no more gasoline lawnmowers and lawn equipment. They want to ban coal, they want to ban natural gas, and they want to ban oil, and they want to replace it with solar and wind. Oh, let's not forget that pleasant smelling biomass that you can smell in the water. I mean, I can't wait. So anyway, they continue to ramble on about how CO2 is causing climate change, but yet we're showing you proof tonight, especially on the Twitter feed, that we saw more hurricanes in 1893 than we are seeing right now. And there was way less CO2 in the atmosphere back in 1893. We're showing you that the frequency of storms is flatlined. Complete dud this year. Even Mike, the weather page, he's very struggling with this. So, speaking of Mike, let's go over here and check out what we have weather-wise. Lots of rain still in the deep south and the Gulf. Actually, one more thing before I go to that. The point of bringing up the crops, I got ahead of myself there. I brought the mic thing in too quickly. The point about mentioning the crops is that we've already seen a wave of price increases during quarter one and quarter two of the fiscal year. We are in Q3 now, heading into Q4 very soon before we know it. The rally that we saw this summer, I believe, is fading away as more fears of a slowing economy approach. The Ukraine war continues to rage on. We continue to see shortages of fertilizer, propane, basic things that we need for agriculture. Weather's not cooperating either. Extreme droughts are killing crops. They're also having to spend more money not just pulling the crops early, but trying to process it so that our animal feed is safe. Not as much ethanol being produced as well. So guess what that's going to do to gas prices? That's right. It's going to go up even more so for the farmers because they're not producing enough yield to spread around for cattle feed, food production, and of course, ethanol. So what we've seen just in this last year up until now is nothing compared to what's going to happen when these farmers begin harvesting their crops this September into October. A lot of farmers, guess what? They're not going to pull the crops out. It is going to be too expensive. It's too expensive right now. Yeah, gasoline prices nationwide have fallen $1 in most places. But that's not enough. Diesel is still priced at $5.29 in most locations. Tell that to the farmer who spent $21,000 a month on harvest when gas prices for diesel was at $3.93 a gallon. And now we're talking $5.20. And OPEC also just released a statement saying that they are probably going to cut production. And that is natural. Why? Because the summer months are winding down. The fall is here. People are back to school. The traveling is dying down. So we still have high demand in fuel and gas. OPEC is now going to drop prices. So that means, that's right, price of oil will go back up once again. Folks, buckle up. Do all the prepping that you can. Get ready. I talked to an old couple today, and they're in their 60s and 70s, and their fear is for their grandkids. Some believe that people are just so in denial about what is coming that they don't want to hear this because it's out of their comfort zone. And folks like the ones that I talked to today that were in their 60s and 70s grew up in an era where you ate beans and rice and pasta. You didn't have meat on the table. Maybe meat on the table was just for Sunday dinner. Let's face it, folks, we've become spoiled as a society. Population has continued to grow, but food production has not. And now we're just having a slight hiccup with climate. We're not warming. We're not cooling that much. And look at the disruptions that we're seeing on top of the supply shortages from the COVID shutdown that's affected prices on fuel, on fertilizer. I mean, there's so many things that factor in. We are causing this appetizer of famine and food shortage. When we get in the 2030s, this will have nothing to do with man at this point. This will be all Mother Nature. Yeah, sorry to lay on the thick fear and loathing here, but folks, I'm telling you, we're seeing some things that I've been instructed on years and years ago, and I was told they were going to happen. I've been watching this stuff unfold every single year, and the time has come to stop sitting here and waiting, seeing for sure if this is going to happen or not, folks. We've shown that. I know our broadcasts aren't as often as we like, but we've shown that on every broadcast. Everything that we've claimed to or said has usually come to fruition just because we're basing our educated guesses on the science that we have learned about solar cycles. Now we'll give a shout out to Mike. Taking a look at the tropics, nada, zero, nothing. One area of a 0% chance. Number 2 has a 0% chance of development in the next 2 days. So here we are on the 24th of August, probably going to go into September before maybe we get our first storm. Now, there's been lots of tropical action in the Gulf, but nothing that is forming these strong storms. Why? Well, there's the El Nino region, 3.4. It is well below the standards of what it needs to be for La Nina. I mean, it's plummeted. We're not even in September. We're already at almost a degree below 0.948, almost a full degree baseline. And we're not even in the fall season here in the Northern Hemisphere. Okay. This is the Gulf of Mexico. Again, we are in peak season in the Gulf. Peak heating is now. And we are only 0.42 degrees above baseline. That doesn't sound like man-made global warming. Here's the East Tropical Atlantic As of today, we are officially point zero 0.048, not 0.48, 0.0. So not even a half degree, not even a half point above baseline. Okay, you got to have really warm waters, right? So there's your reason, folks, why we are looking at such an inactive season here in the tropics. We are seeing, look at all that cold water that's out there in South America, and that's due to all this record cold we've seen from this weather here in the southern hemisphere. Boy, is it really shaping up like it's going to be a doozy of a winter come this year. All right, folks, let's take a look. I haven't had any success with these models lately. Let's hope this works tonight. It looks like it's going to, I think. Yeah. All right, so more rain to the south, the soggy south here. This is through Friday, August 26th. No major storms to report of by this point. The Midwest and Iowa and parts of Minnesota, Missouri, into Illinois, we'll see rain developing across the part of the country, north to south, really from border to border, all the way into the Gulf. Once again, more soaking rains on the way to southern parts of Texas, southeast parts of Texas, and Louisiana as well. Now, it does look like there's a couple systems here in the Gulf that try to get its act together, but right now, we're not looking at anything. High pressure dominating in the Atlantic Ocean in the middle, as it should be at this point in the year, but it might get a little more soggier across the Midwest, across Texas, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma. These are areas that actually need the moisture. Now, parts of Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio might start to get waterlogged as we had quite a round of storms that affected the region and into the Northeast as well. As we move through the last day of August, next Wednesday, August 31st, high pressure trying to make its way through in the Northeast, and it does clip Maine and parts of New Hampshire, but for the most part, we are seeing summery temperatures. Finally, by September 2nd, the GFS shows us a glimpse at a possible low pressure system that could be getting its act together by September 5th. This is a long way out. By any means is this the law, but for the first time, the GFS is finally showing some kind of activity approaching the western side right now as we speak of the panhandle of Florida by September 8th. Now, this would be, at this time, the pressure that is predicted, and I had to scoot in there, folks, sorry about that, but we are looking at a weak Category 2, maybe a strong Category 1 storm at best. It looks impressive. Massive feature here, lots of rain with it. But at this point, with as loose as these rings are, and what I mean by that here, and follow my cursor, if these were tighter, then I would be concerned about stronger winds. But again, in the Gulf during La Nina, there is more wind shear present. So as these storms approach land, wind shear literally tears these things apart. And look, this looks like to be an impressive system. Out here in the Gulf, as it moves closer, we see a little bit of strength loss here. But as it approaches land, again, let's see. We see this feature, the rings get further apart. That means the wind is not as tight. And we are basically looking at a very strong tropical storm. Again, chances it could be a Cat 1, Cat 2. Way too early to tell, as this model has this thing actually strengthening as it makes landfall. Again, 985 is the pressure. This is not super, super low, but this is a big system, and this could bring a lot of rain to the southeast here in the first week of September. Most of our kids up here, actually, this is the first day of school for our kids down up here in upstate New York. Dry, beautiful weather, it looks like, so that's a great day across the nation, actually. But the southeast, not so lucky. In fact, starting to look at this model with a little bit of concern of flooding rains across South Carolina, and this is not good. This system, again, this is very, 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 very early. But this system is projected to make a path somewhere in eastern Tennessee and eastern Kentucky, where we already have had devastating floods. So this area could be affected. Now, again, this is way too early but it is our first significant action on our weather models in quite some time. So just because we've had a light season doesn't mean we don't need to stay prepared and aware. Now, at the same time that we're dealing with this storm, and it looks like it could be at least a Cat 1, a Cat 2, look what's going on up here in Canada. That is snow, ladies and gentlemen. Our first snowflakes. It's not that early, honestly. We've seen snowflakes flying in Canada before in July and August. But with that being said, let's take a look at our temperatures. Most of the country, very summery. Here is tomorrow, hot across the central part of the country. Not bad in the south because of all that rain. So just because the temperature, surface temperature is down, doesn't mean the humidity doesn't make it feel like it's still 95 degrees outside. With all that moisture, it does not feel like it's 77 out. Trust me on that. It's not cool and pleasant. But very warm across most of the country for Thursday, and humidity staying relatively low for the northern parts in the Midwest. And then we get into this weekend on Friday, August 26th. We see much of the country surging again into the 90s across the East Coast, into the upper 80s in parts of Ohio and Pennsylvania, across Tennessee and Kentucky as well. Staying pleasant and cool across the Northeast in the 60s and 70s in the north part of New York, and in New Hampshire and Vermont and Maine. Looking lovely across the region over the weekend. Getting hot again across the Central Plains once again. It's almost like that summery last push. August 29th into September, as we see really hot temperatures across much of the South and the East Coast. Again, those kinds of temperatures are going to make that storm in the first week of September very favorable. And we do see plenty of 90s and 80s, upper 80s across the South and the East Coast. So the waters are definitely warming up for hurricane season. But here's that cold front up in the Northeast that I was showing you that brings us our first snow in Canada. Look at that. That green is really pushing down, and so here it begins. And the first week of September, lows in the upper 40s and mid 40s in parts of upstate New York, with high temperatures pleasantly in the low 70s and 60s. And if you see across the Midwest, well, those temperatures are low because of all the moisture they're going to be getting from a low pressure system moving across into the Northeast. You'll see those temperatures fall into the 50s for highs, daytime highs, and then quickly rebound back into the 70s the next day, while things try to heat up once again by the end of that week. September 8th is where we see high temperatures starting to finally fizzle out. But look at that big blob right here. That is our storm. That is our hurricane, tropical storm that will be dropping large amounts of rain across the eastern seaboard into Virginia, West Virginia, East Tennessee, Kentucky. Southern Ohio could see this storm as well. Parts of Cincinnati, Ohio, also Dayton, Ohio. This is not going to be a hurricane storm by any means, but a pressure of 995 is still going to be a strong, gusty winds, lots of rain, flash flooding, down trees, power lines, you name it. So this could be either summer's kiss goodbye or just the beginning of a very active September. A lot still to be seen with temperatures, ocean temperatures. Right now, I'm not favoring a lot of stormy activity, but things are definitely getting interesting with the sun and the weather as well. I want to say hello to a few folks out there. We got Knife Collector Arnold Schmidt, Jerome, hello there. Mason Free Party, my lovely wife Mari. Good to see Robert Hill out here as well. Michael W. Sorry for the long delay for the show, but thank you guys for being so patient, man. We really appreciate that. Burn Remains, interesting screen name there, but thank you for joining us. Shirley Davis, hello to Patricia Clayton. Mr. Nobody, he's just here seeing what's going on. Salt Girl also in the chat with us tonight. Matthias Treeman, I like that name. That's actually kind of cool. Very enthusiastic gardener, my Baltimorean friend. Hello there. We're ready for football season, I'm sure. Christina B. as well. And many, 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 many others here. Whittle the Wood Elf. That's funny too. Okay, but nonetheless, looks like we had a fun night here in the chat. And Randy Willis also, hello to you as well. So good to see a lot of our familiar faces, our subs who have been so patient. We used to be a daily broadcast, then we went 3 times a week, then we went once a week, and now it's been once every 2 or 3 weeks. Folks, last week was out of my control. I caught a case of laryngitis, woke up Friday morning and didn't have a voice. This is the first time that I've been able to actually talk for a long period of time without any issues. So, again, thank you so much for all of your support, for being patient, waiting around. You guys, we've tried to stay active on Twitter. I don't have to talk on Twitter. But I really do appreciate the support and the kind words that we get. Even when we're not off the air, it seems like the subs still increase on YouTube. The followers keep coming on Twitter. And again, it means a lot to Mari and I when we see the kind of support that we get from you guys. And I'm going to let you slide on that one, very enthusiastic gardener. We don't say those words on this channel. All right, that's going to do it for me tonight, folks. Again, thank you for tuning in. The date is way wrong. It's been wrong the whole show. Yeah, don't pay attention to the date on the screen. Sorry about that, folks. It is not August 22nd at all. It is the 24th. But anyway, thank you for tuning in for tonight's show, and we will be back. I promise. It will not be 2 or 3 weeks. It won't even be a week. Lots of stuff happening. We're going to continue to monitor everything the best that we can, the only way we know how to, here on the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Until next time, everyone be safe out there, and we will talk soon. Take care.
Do you like this show? Give us a thumbs up. Want to support us more? Share to your favorite social media platform. Buy a t-shirt or become a Patreon. All links are in the description below.